Good morning. My name is Miss Shantarius Williams. I am a high school biology teacher, and today I will be going over the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, also known as FERPA. This is the law I selected to go over for today. In the PowerPoint, we will discuss different characteristics of how this law impacts families, students, teachers, and school districts. Okay, so let's start with talking about what is the FERPA law. So, this is a federal law that was developed in 1974 that was meant to protect the privacy of students and their educational records. All right, so the law applies and is enforced by all schools that receive any funding from the U.S. Department of Education. This law does not only apply to students at grade level, so it's not just a law that we see in high school, elementary school, middle school. This law is also enforced in any public university and college level or post-secondary schools. All right. Under this act, any student at the age of 17 or younger have the following rights. The parents can have access to review the student's educational records. It's required to modify any information in the student's record, so the parent has to give consent before anything is changed inside of that student's records. They also have the right to provide or withhold consent to disclose the student's personal identity information in any educational records. So a school can't just go and share the personal information of a student to some outside source, even if it's like for data collection, things like that. The parents have to provide consent saying it's okay for you to share any of my students' confidential information with some outside source. Um, they can file complaints on the student's behalf to the U.S. Department of Education if they believe that their rights are being violated. So, if a parent does have an inclination that their student's information is being shared or disclosed and they have not given consent, they can file a complaint. Now, that's for any minor, anybody under the age of 17. At the age of 18 or older, those rights shift from the parents to the student, and the student has to give consent even to their parents. So like if you're 18 or older, your parent can't call your school or your post-secondary education and say, hey, I'm trying to get these records from my child. You can't do that. The child has to give consent for the parent to even look at those rights. All right, so this law was enacted to prohibit schools from being able to share any confidential information students without written consent for the parent, guardian, or age of the student. Okay, so it was made so that we can't just go out and share information all willy nilly. The exception are school officials with limited educational interest, schools that students are transferring to, or in cases of health and safety emergency. So if something happens at the school and a child has to be rushed to the hospital, it is okay for us to share certain information with the hospital. Now, the FERPA law was originally created to address growing issues in the 1970s associated with privacy of students, um, the accuracy of the school records, and the limited access parents had to information about their child's records. So at that time, there was a lot of sharing of students' information to whoever they wanted to. They wouldn't allow parents to come and pick up their students' records and things of that nature, limiting the rights that parents had to their own students' paperwork and the accuracy. They weren't handling those students' records. Records were being lost very frequently during that time. So before the FERPA Act was passed, schools had very limited rules about how to handle students' records, and parents weren't, and schools didn't have to provide information to the parents about their student records at all. And they didn't have to get consent from the parent to share that information to third parties. So they went ahead and passed this law so that we could increase the rights of the parents and the students. Now, looking at present day, current perspective on this law is now currently being edited so that we can include the technology and data part of it. We are now in the technology age, and so now these records are digitized. Now we have to make more amendments to this law so that we can control how we share information through data sources and leakage of that information from how we store that data. Okay, so the standards are not up to par with parents and students right currently for technology based. Um, the protection of digital data is a problem that includes any learning apps that we use in the schools, certain online apps, and cloud storage. Because, like I said, anybody can gain access to that if they hack into it, if they have the password. So there's not much protection. And if we use a certain app that the school hasn't vetted or something like that, and the student's information's in there, that could also lead to leakage. Any third-party vendors that we may encounter in student data. So when we're testing, outsourced testing and things like that, those have to be vetted as well. And any test that teachers like to do, a common one we like to do is like your learning styles. That those apps have to be vetted before we can actually give that information out to our kids, as well as any school safety concerns when determining which situation is it appropriate to give out information and when it's not appropriate to disclose that information. So positives about this law is that it protects our students' privacy. The law makes sure that our students' information is protected and we can't just share and disclose it to any and everyone. It also gives power back to the student, and at a certain age, it gives power to that student as well. I meant to say it gives power to the parents, and also at a certain age, it gives power back to the student, um, so that they can make decisions on behalf of their child that they feel that's best for them, or for the students to make decisions that's best for themselves. It also establishes a clear rights and responsibilities. It tells the school district these are what you can and cannot do with student records, and you have to make sure that everybody that works in your building is acknowledges these rights. Okay, so some of the weaknesses, like I said before, it is very outdated when it comes down to technology because, like I said, we're in a technology age. Technology is booming, and this law was written in 1970 before we had cell phones. So there's a lot of things that are not covered in this act that has to be amended and as quickly as possible. And some of the information in the law is not clear and concise. It's left up to interpretation. So my school district may interpret it different from another school district. It needs to be a little bit more clear cut that to where every school is doing the exact same thing. All right. And it's limitedly enforced. There's not many penalties that have been associated with leakage of students' data and things of that nature. So it's not really being enforced at like you would. So it's almost like a mild law that nobody's actually enforcing much. All right. And mismatched with modern safety concerns. Some schools have issues with balancing the protection when it comes down to keeping students safe. So they don't know, okay, I I got to make sure that I'm not violating FERPA when I'm giving you this certain information. Can I give you this information before? And it delays those students being able to get the treatment that they need. So now looking at how this impacts the schools, teachers, and the learning environment. When it comes down to the law, it requires that every member of the school system is trained annually on this information and maintaining strict confidentiality of that student's information. These trainings take time out of everybody's day. We have something called data governance that happens every month where we have to take a quiz, go through a training that we make sure that we are paying attention to how data is being dispersed and technology is being used with student information. So every month we have a different training and we do these trainings every year. All right. When it comes down to teachers, it slows down our ability to communicate students' information. For example, here, one of the things when it comes down to emailing about a student. So if we have a student that's skipping, we can't put in the email so and so is skipping. We have to go and put their student code in the subject. We can't use the name, we have to use the student code. So now I have to go into my Infinite Campus, find that student's code, put it in there, and then share it to everybody in the school. So, and then when you go look, you have to go look up that student code because we don't know. We have 200 kids that we have to look after. We don't know that student codes by heart. So you have to go look up that person's code. So 30 minutes have gone by before we find out who that student is. So it does delay our ability to communicate that information. And also, if a parent emails me about their child's grade, I can't just upright and put it on in there. I can't just say email her back and be like, hey, this is the child's grade, da 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 this, da da that. I can't disclose that information through email. I have to call them and give that information out because of the way the law is set up when it comes to sharing information digitally. Um, yeah. All right, and here's my works cited. I appreciate you all listening to my banter over the law. I know this took a long time, and I do apologize that I went over the time limit, but I learned a lot of new things about this law and that I didn't know, and I didn't realize how we are actually violating some of these things as a school and a district without actually knowing that we're doing it. So, like I said, there has to be some more concise um, rhetoric around the law so that we know that we're doing everything right. And I appreciate your time. You have a great rest of your day.